families
ran up and just said, "Mama, am I adopted?"
come in all forms.
We didn't even really think of it as like an adoption. We were just having another baby.
But adoption itself is evolving.
Probably 95% of adoptions have some type of openness.
This week on Open Record,
we've been very lucky.
From single parents to grandparents, to dad and mom.
The family dynamics have changed.
We explore the changing face of adoption. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Bryan Polcyn, and I'm here with Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
And we are once again joined by FOX6 News anchor Mary Stoker Smith. Hello, Mary.
So honored to be here on
is-
the other side. This is great. This is so near and dear to my heart, you guys, as you well know. And so when I approached Sarah about this topic and doing a story to bring in local viewers and show a local family and their journey to adoption, it meant so much to me. So.
We're glad to have you here to talk about it. We are recording this episode on Tuesday, November 19th. And earlier this month, Mary, as she said, reported on something very near and dear to her own heart. That is the evolution of adoption in Wisconsin. It is a world fraught with tragedy and triumph, heartbreak and joy, and it is constantly changing. We're going to talk about how the walls between birth parents and adoptive parents are coming down, the increasing role in adoption of relatives, and how the very definition of what makes a family is changing what adoptive families look like. All of that and more when we come back after the break.
Welcome back to Open Record. Mary, you introduced us to a Franklin couple with 2 adopted children. Mm-hmm. So when you came to me to tell me, hey, I want to do this story, what made you want to do it in the first place before you even approached me?
Well, it was funny because we talk about adoption and, kind of this broader sense. And I thought there are so many local families that I've met through the years. This would be my 3rd year emceeing this great event with Adoption Choice. And so I thought, why not localize this and make people in our community tangible? The things that they are going through are what so many are going through. Millions of people are going through. And I was amazed at how many stories that there were right in our backyard.
Tell us about the one you profiled in your story, the couple that you met.
This wonderful family, the Garcias, had a long and arduous and quite frankly, a very sad journey to adoption. They were doing IVF for years, more than 5 years. Their first round was about 2, and then they went through about 5. And to go through that and not see the results, obviously financially, it's a big struggle, but emotionally, I said to them, how did you get through this? And they said, a lot of tears, and we just gave up. We wanted a family. We're a same-sex couple, so we couldn't really do things the traditional way, so to speak, but that's all we really wanted in our lives. And they never thought about adoption. That was the crazy part, is that kind of fell in their lap after years of trying, and they kind of said, why didn't we do this earlier?
So what happened? So you said, they obviously, that wasn't even really on their radar, but then they got a phone call.
They got a phone call. One day the phone rang, and it was a family relative who said, we know that you guys have been struggling and you've wanted to have a family. The young lady said, I know in my heart I'm not ready to bring this child into the world. She was young, is young, and just felt like she couldn't give the supportive environment that they could. So I think it was a very difficult decision for her, as it is for most women, to give up a biological child, but she knew in her heart it was the right thing to do. And so it was kind of at the 11th hour. I think, thinking about this baby coming in the world without the real structure she wanted, she turned to the Garcias to adopt.
I think when you're going through, any family's going through that process of trying to have a biological child, IVF is what they're trying, and you're still holding on to hope that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And here was a moment presented to them that maybe at some point we're going to give that up and look toward adoption, but here they were saying, you've got to decide now. Mm-hmm. And you said that was a difficult decision. Obviously, looking back, I'm sure they're grateful they made that decision. This came, though, you said, from a relative, from someone in the family. So did that also play into their decision making as to, did it help them decide, or did it actually make it more difficult because now that's going to be a person who always knows?
That's a great question, because they said that. They said, well, it was like, okay, wait, this is happening, but this is also a family member. This is going to change the dynamic. They said there was a pause. They said, I got to be honest, it'd be easier if it was somebody we didn't know, but because we knew this person and we didn't know what the expectations were. We didn't know how much involvement she would want, but also I think that the thought that, there's even more pressure, if you will. So I think there was a little bit of apprehension at first that they were going to be able to to meet the challenges and the needs, and then how does this play out going forward? What happens 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Well, and so they adopt the baby, and it was a girl, right?
A little girl.
Yeah. So they're raising her, and then they think, okay, we want to give her a little brother or a little sister. So
Right.
what was that then? What was the next step then?
So once Jace came, they were saying, okay, well, we want to complete our family. We'd like another child. So they went through another round of the IVF treatment.
So trying to go back to biological.
Trying to go
Right.
back to
Yeah, right.
biological, because I think they all often felt like, we can still do this. But because this was such an unconventional adoption, they decided to do another round. That round was 5 years. Absolutely no success. And then guess what happened? The phone
Did
rang
it again? Yeah.
And as I said in my story, how's that for a plot twist? Phone rang again, another relative, just another girl who said, you know what, I know you guys wanted to grow your family. This came at the last minute. The baby's coming now. I want you to be the parents. Can you get here? And so Lauren jumped on a plane. That's one of the couple, Riley and Lauren. And Lauren jumped on a plane and just went and got there. And eventually Riley came, that's her partner. And so that just worked out. But they said, look at all this, look at what happened. And we didn't even think about it. We were just there. Done.
So it was Lauren and Riley, is that right? So let me ask this, because for someone listening to this and they go, well, wait a minute, hang on, back up for a second. You said they were really, really trying for this biological child, but it's a same-sex couple. So you would think maybe adoption would have entered the thought earlier.
Right.
It does. I have the question then, if they were going through IVF, just thinking logistically, who was there a donor of some sort? Was it a stranger? Was it someone they knew? How did that part of this whole process work before they decided, let's go the adoption route?
Right. They didn't really, they just really didn't get into how that works with a couple. The one thing that they were struggling with, quite honestly, was the insurance part of it, because there are places with your insurance group or ways for the insurance to pay for that if you're deemed, like you have some fertility issues. But because they were a same-sex couple, it was even more challenging for them to get the insurance coverage. And so I don't know if that made them more tenacious, like, well, we're going to get this done. But we didn't get into who.
What I hear is you talk about all of this, and we'll talk more about this with our guest later on. But the emotions that are wrapped up in this, it seems like the decision to adopt, and then the process for adoption, legal rights within that process. You need a good lawyer and a good therapist. I mean, it seems like this is something that is there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in all of this.
Absolutely. There is. There's so much at stake. This is a child. And when you adopt a child too, is you well know, and I'll talk about that when I get to my story, that's your child. There is no, they were adopted, so it's 90%. It's 100%, 110, all the way around. So
one of the things that you were talking about in your story is because the whole point when you had first come to me was the story, the point of it is that the face of adoption is changing, and not the physical face. It's the family structure. It's the makeup of who is adopting kids. And one of the things that you talked about in the story was how, when Jace starts asking, oh, I have two moms. Oh, what was that conversation going to be like? And so what did her parents say?
they said, we don't know how we'll answer it. We don't have all the answers, but we do know we have a strong support system. We do know that there's a lot of love. And that's what we'll use. I mean, I said to them directly, what will you say if kids kind of start saying, well, why don't you have a dad? And they said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We want to be just as open and honest as we can, but we just don't quite know. We don't have all the answers right now, but we'll figure it out. And they will. I think that they will. It's got to be tough, though, to think once they get to a certain age, what will happen.
Because I think already it's a difficult conversation. I just talked about it with my kids because they have some classmates who are adopted, and so they didn't quite understand what that meant. And so explaining that these parents love these kids as their own, and the reason why maybe biological mom, couldn't take care of them, whether it's financially or environmentally or whatever, but just that these are their family. This is their family. And so that it's already kind of a difficult conversation. I feel like, oh, I'm adopted, and now I'm adopted, and I feel like I'm a little bit another challenge of a gay couple versus what some might deem a a traditional family where it's a man and a woman.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's becoming so much more common, but another reason I want to tell their story is to give other people a platform, give them hope. There was a time where they would have said, we can't adopt, we can't have a family. We're a gay couple, or, two men. And isn't it great to think that's no longer, those walls are broken down. Maybe not to the extent that we want them to be, or they should be, but they, brick by brick, are coming down.
I think it's interesting because, and I wonder, and maybe we'll talk about the guest about this later, as LGBTQ families are more and more involved in the adoption world, has that increased the number of sort of adoption requests,
Right.
people who
Yeah, I
want
was
to
wondering
have
that too.
infants? Because it's kind of, I often think about it, we hear about it when the Humane Society's here, we talk about everybody wants a puppy instead of the older dogs. Well, in this case, everybody wants a baby because they want to raise it from infancy.
Right.
And so is there a greater demand for sort of infant adoptions? And where does that leave older kids? Where does that leave kids maybe in the foster system who are no longer infants, but just as much need a loving family?
If not more, because there is such a need, and there's a point where they just kind of age out, so to speak, or they spend their life in foster care and they never have that permanent family. And imagine the feeling of that, of having to go through life thinking I was never chosen, that type of feeling. And so I know we'll get to that when we talk to the executive director of Adoption Choice later, Angie Flannery, about this need for young kids, not infants, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years old who are in foster care who have yet to find a permanent family. There's a great need, particularly in southeastern Wisconsin and Milwaukee.
What are some of one of the other things that we talked about were the closed adoption versus open adoption, and how that is shifting as well. It used to be you adopted a child and then that was it. The birth mom gave up all rights, never saw him, never was able to
Never knew what happened
communicate.
after that.
It just was kind of like sign the paper and good luck. But now that's also changing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The biggest surprise I had when doing this story was that I learned 95% of adoptions are open. That's a huge swing from not that many years ago. When I tried to find my birth mother, there were so many walls, if you will. I went to the courthouse and they said, oh no, those are sealed. Those records are sealed. And so there was no way to find them. And now most of them are open, which goes back to our story of our Franklin couple, for them to be able to say, okay, yeah, we want you to adopt our baby, the girl, because we know you. And so now there's that element. It's hard for me to say this out loud, but I have to. I had mixed feelings about that. I found my birth mother when I was 30. How would I have felt if she was in my life at the formative point in my life where I'm 14? I don't know. It's a tough thing. It's a tough line. There are so many positives, but you have to think about the kids too. How are they going to feel trying to juggle 2 parents, 2 households, and sometimes 2 demands? I think it's a good thing. But
I wonder if it also, though, when you're talking about the decision, because I think of the pregnant mother who is giving up the child and determining, I'm not ready for this, but I want this child to have a good life. And I think this child can have a better life in someone else's hands. That's a very difficult decision to make. I can't imagine being in that spot. But if there might be a chance to stay involved, to be connected, to watch my child grow up, to maybe even get to know them, does that make it more attractive to someone? Does it make it an easier decision that you're not just saying goodbye forever?
Right. I think a lot of women, if they've given up a baby and they're watching this right now, may think, I always wondered if they were safe. It's the first thing my birth mother said to me. Are they safe? Imagine giving up a child. You'd think about that every day. Are they okay? Are they healthy? Are they okay? And so I think for them, the birth mother, that's got to be some reassurance and some comfort to know, because there's got to be guilt. No matter what your circumstance, there's got to be guilt. It's just innate. You're giving up your child. Oh no, what am I doing? Are they going to be okay? So I think for the birth families, the birth mother in particular, it's a positive.
Well, and I think the other thing too now with all of these DNA searching, 23andMe, all that stuff. I mean, people are finding relatives that they never knew about, that they distant relatives,
people who thought they were in closed adoptions are finding.
And so now suddenly you find, oh, I did want to find my birth mom, but maybe birth mom doesn't want to be found or something, or reverse.
Right. Yeah.
And that's probably leading to a whole new slew of challenges for both sides.
I would think so. I just heard about a story where this guy was working at his favorite bakery, and that turned out to be his birth mother. They lived so close to each other. It was a story out of Chicago. But through the DNA, the DNA testing, whatever it is. Yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, there are birth parents probably who think, or people who've said, oh, there was a book I was going to bring. It was called The Girls That Went Away. And when I found my birth mother, that book came on the shelves, and it was about women who went away because they got pregnant. And back in the day, you weren't seen. That was a real red mark on you. And so you went to what's called a school reformatory for girls, a wayward school for girls, whatever they wanted to deem it. And it was a place where you went to hide the pregnancy. The family said, oh, she's away on a little trip. And you had the baby, and then that was it. And there's a generation out there of those girls. Imagine if there's women even listening now that think, I don't want my family to know. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a hard secret to harbinger, to have. And I don't know.
You already have given us a sneak peek into some of your own experience, but I want to talk more because Mary does know of which she speaks. Mary is adopted. She's been very open about that. And we're going to talk about Mary Stoker Smith's own adoption experience when we come back after the break. We are back on Open Record. Mary Stoker Smith, main anchor at FOX6 News, MC of countless galas, including the Adoption Choice Gala, adopted child. You have been very open about that. How do you think being adopted shaped who you are today?
I think everything. It was difficult for me because of the dynamic. My parents are white. I have 3 white brothers. My sister is Korean. She's from Seoul, Korea. And so growing up in La Crosse, this homogenous environment in the 70s, and all the stares we would get and all the people, and somebody said to me once, is your sister an Eskimo? And I'm like, no, she's not an Eskimo. She's from Korea. But they didn't know. People in La Crosse have never seen somebody who's Korean. And so it was difficult for me. I think it sometimes I felt, oh no, why me? Why are people staring? And my mom would assure me, and I'll never forget one year she gave me a little doll, and it was a doll my complexion with really fuzzy curly hair, and I hated it. I wanted Farrah Fawcett roller mark hair. I wanted that doll. So there was
was that environmental for you? Was that because you wanted to fit in La Crosse?
And I think at that point that was your marquee of beauty. That was it, the little golden locks and the doll. And so when she gave me that, it was almost a reminder that I don't have hair like that. I don't fit in like that. I don't want to lay in the sun with baby oil because I already have a complexion, I've already got melanin. So I think it was difficult at a certain time in my life to say, I hate this. I don't want to be different. I just want to fit in with my blonde friends. When I say there was nobody, I mean, there was nobody in La Crosse. If you were a brunette, it was a thing. And so it was hard for me. Nobody treated me differently. I was not bragging, just saying I was popular. I was homecoming queen, but I didn't date.
She's bragging a little bit.
Yeah,
no,
it's a flex.
A little bit.
we can all see why you're popular. You're still popular.
But I never fit in like that. I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't feel like I was really, so they didn't treat me, but I just felt like this, I don't want to feel different. Do you guys know what I mean? You just want to fit in.
Yeah. And then tell us so your mom and dad. So, tell us about what they were like growing up for you. I mean, how early did you know you were adopted? Like what kind of stuff?
Well, right away, I said to my mom once, what's it like to have white skin? And she said, just like it is to have your skin. I mean, it's just, so they were always just very open and very, there was never I brought a boyfriend home in college and my brother stole my bowl of cereal. And he's like, your brothers don't treat you any different. I'm like, they're my brothers. Mm-hmm. They could care less. I mean, it was just a very open family. We didn't talk a lot about it, but they just treated Jane and I and the whole family. It was not a thing.
It was a family, yeah. So your sister's adopted as well?
Yeah, Jane is adopted. Okay. She's from Korea.
And then are your brothers?
So my brothers are 3. They're 3 natural kids.
Got it.
And they said my parents said we wanted girls. So they adopted Jane. And then later me, and my mom tells the story, she told it at the event that I emceed. When it came to me, the agency called and said, okay, we have a girl, but she's hard to place. What do you mean? She's hard to place in the file. The file, which I saw at one point, said hard to place. Why? Because of her background. I was in 3 foster homes. The last one was Bonduel. And then when I was 6 months, I came to La Crosse, and the adoption papers came to my parents, says, we have a girl. We know you wanted one more girl. And my mom said, why is she hard to place? And they said, you want to come down and look at her? That was the answer. It's this famous family story. And my mother, and if you know her, even at 91, said
She's quick. She's
this isn't a sack of potatoes. No, we don't want to look at her. She tells that story with gusto. And she said, we didn't know why they said that, but we got there and there you are on the floor, laying on the floor. And we thought, oh, and it's because you were biracial. The paper said hard to place because their words now, nobody get upset. She's half Negroid. In 1969, you said Negroid. That was the word. Mom was white, dad was Negro. And so I was a Negroid baby, hard to place. Because back in the day, a biracial baby
And they
was...
wouldn't even say that over the phone. They said, "You
Come
take a
look at her. Come look at her." And my mom was
horrifying to
horrified.
hear that today.
Today.
Wow.
But back in the day,
Yeah.
as you can imagine. And so I said to them, my parents, what were you thinking? And my dad said, we didn't care. My dad was a minister. And he said there was one person in the church that had a little apprehension, and we didn't care. If you need to leave, leave. It didn't matter to us. They said it didn't matter, and it didn't matter to my parents. They could have cared less.
But what I wonder then is, you said in our last segment, I think you said that you met your birth mother at 30.
Yeah.
When you were 30?
I was 30, and
You were
my
30.
mom sent me a note saying, if you want to find her, here's the agency. She gave me the green light because I always wanted to do it, but I didn't want to hurt
That was my
her
question.
feelings.
Had you always wanted to know? Did you grow up in the back of your mind with that question of, okay, but what if and why?
Right.
Was that always nagging at you?
I never talked to my parents because I didn't want to hurt them, but I talked to my grandmother a lot because we were so close. And she'd say, you know what? I bet it was a teenager that came to La Crosse from Minneapolis and had you. I bet she was a teenager. And I always fantasized about some blonde teenager with Farrah Fawcett hair. And so I always wondered, but I never wanted to hurt their feelings because we were so close. And so when I got that letter from my mom, and I think it was because I turned 30, she said, if you want to find your birth mother, it was a card. I still have it. Here's the agency. And it was an agency, Lutheran Social Services in Madison. And I called them. And I'll never forget it. I called them and I said, my name is Mary Stoker Smith, and gave them the details. And they said, she came in. She signed a thing. I don't know if you call it an
Somewhere
affidavit.
along the way, she signed a thing
Somewhere
saying,
she came in, I think it was either to the agency affiliate in Milwaukee or Madison, and said, if she's ever looking for me, you can release the records. Because remember, at one point I tried to find the records and the court said sealed. Nope. So she came in and she said, if she's ever looking, she can find me.
Where was she at the time? Was she in Wisconsin?
She was born and raised in Milwaukee.
Okay.
They sent her away to La Crosse, her parents, because they found out she was pregnant, and that was terrible. She wouldn't tell them who the birth father was. And then months into the pregnancy, she told him. And I won't say his first name because I've never met him. I know what it is. And they said, okay. So she was supposed to go to Whitewater to school, the UW Whitewater, and they sent her to La Crosse. And when she came back from having me, she wanted to go back to Whitewater, and her parents ostracized her and said, that was your Whitewater money. They were so angry because she was giving birth at 18. Mm-hmm. She met my birth father in high school, and then she was having this black baby. They were so angry, and she was ostracized. And she said to me when I met her, I didn't want to give you up. It took me forever to sign the papers, and I signed them, and I was so sad. And so it was great for her. Now I'm lost in the story of where we were chronologically.
How was it for you? Because we're thinking of it first through her eyes, but for you to meet her after all those years, what was that like?
It was weird. I thought I would be emotional, and I was very, as emotional as I am, and I'm an extrovert, I was very kind of stoic and, oh, okay. Yeah. And I saw what it did for her, and that brought me joy. So I wasn't overly like, I met you and it's great. It was wonderful. But I loved my parents so very much. And I remember saying to my mom, before I did this, I'm like, you are my mother. There is a bond that will never be broken. And I was so emotional about them and not wanting to hurt them. And so when I met Chris, it was kind of like Christine. I was like, okay, this is great. I got off the plane. I was living in Boston, my husband and I got off the plane here at Mitchell International Airport. And at that point, it was 1998, something 1999. You could walk to the gate. And I get off the plane and I see this woman. And there she is with her blue eyes and her blonde hair. That's her. I'd never seen her. Yeah. She never sent me a picture. I didn't know. I just knew I was meeting my birth mother in the plane, and I got up, and that was her.
Have you stayed in contact since?
We had a lovely relationship. It was lovely. So we met. She never had other kids, never been married, and so for her, it was so grounding and so affirmative that here I had this daughter who's safe and I like her and she's smart and all that fun and she's me. She's a girly girl with sparkles. She was a sparkly girl. And so we had a wonderful relationship. There was a point where my mom said, okay, you kind of dial that back now. My mom.
Well, I was going to say,
Are we good?
I was going to say
Yeah.
that the courage it took
Yes,
for your mom to say,
Yes,
if you want to, here you go.
Yeah. And so we kind of stopped talking about her, but my dad and I, who were just so close too, when we would get together, then like we went Christmas shopping for my mom. And so the two of us in the car, he'd say, how's Christine? I'd say, she's great. And the last time I told him that before he passed away, he cried. He cried and he said, I'm so glad she, because he knew what it meant to her. So dad and I could talk, but mom and I was kind of like, we're done. She was like,
I love that.
we're good.
Well, you know what? We have this has been. I really appreciate you sharing so transparently. You're so open about this. And by the way, I think might be the first one who I think first one who can say I made Mary Stoker Smith cry on the air. So that's fantastic. But no, I want to bring our guest in because we have Angie Flannery, who is it executive director? Is that right, of Adoption Choice?
Yeah.
And so many questions to ask her. We're grateful she is here. She will be here on Open Record when we come right back. We are back on Open Record. We have a special guest joining us this week, and that is the executive director of Adoption Choice, Angie Flannery. Angie, thank you so much for being here on Open Record.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you have had Mary Stoker Smith MC your gala, I think 3 years in a row now. Is that right?
I keep inviting myself back. She can't say no.
And now you got to listen to her tell her story. She's probably told pieces of that, if not all of it, at the gala. But what were you thinking as you were listening in?
I learn more and more about Mary's story every time I hear it, and I love it. It's a fantastic story, and it's actually very reflective of adoptions or children that were placed for adoption during that era. And so it helps to remind me and helps me to remind others why we have changed, why adoption has changed and come so far since then.
How has it changed? You know, obviously in the last couple decades, probably even in the last couple of years, I mean, adoption has truly shifted from what it used to be.
Yes, absolutely. So we have more openness. Absolutely. I've been doing this for 15 years and I've seen dramatic change in just the last decade and a half. And I know even prior to that, there's been even more change, lots of openness, lots of exchange of information, children knowing more about their birth family and their story, and as it should be, and birth parents also having more information of where their children go and not wondering for years or decades as to whether or not their children are safe, are loved, are growing up in a supportive home. And it's just wonderful to see.
You, I believe your organization is celebrating 35 years in existence, and on your website you have 35 families that are featured, and one of them includes our own Brett Lemoyne, his husband Joe, and their child who adopted through your agency. Mary's story interviewed a couple, a gay female couple who adopted as well, and talking about the changing face of adoption. How has the emergence of the LGBTQ plus community in this area changed adoption on a grander scale, sort of on the macro level?
We are actually approaching 40 years. That page is a couple years old, so we are almost 40 years around. But we have seen a change with the same-sex and the LGBTQ community. We work with more and more families in that community. It's become more accepted that that's just another type of family. We don't see those folks any differently than your typical heterosexual couple. It's a family. It's a couple that wants to grow their family by adding children. And we see that change in our birth families as well. They look at single individuals, LGBTQ individuals as people who just want to love a child and want to grow their family. And through adoption, they can make that happen by placing their child with one of our families.
Angie, when I interviewed you for the piece, one of the things we just didn't have time to get into because of TV restrictions and times was the wait. it has the need for LGBTQ families or just non-traditional families. Has that increased the wait time for kids to get adoption or, for the families to take them in, or is it about the same?
I would say that overall, so nationally, the available situations for moms who are looking to place a child for adoption, make an adoption plan, those situations have decreased over the last decade or so, and a lot of that just has to do with the programs that are available for parenting individuals. Some of it is, it's a hard decision, as you guys mentioned earlier. It is not a decision that women or men take lightly to place a child for adoption. It's really a matter of circumstance and how they feel as to whether or not they feel prepared to raise a child. And so that is a difficult decision that we see our moms make. And they are simply looking for a family that will have some openness, that will care for their child in a way that they may not be able to. So the demand is there for all families. We see a demand for diverse families when we are looking for placing infants. But I would say that there are always going to be more adoptive families than there are situations for infants, as you referred to earlier, that is definitely a demand for adoptive families is a newborn.
How much of the adoption universe is international adoptions versus domestic adoptions, public welfare type adoptions versus private adoptions? Can you give us some idea there?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely international adoption has gone down. The percentage is drastic. Over the past almost 20 years, we've seen a 90% decrease in the number of children being adopted through intercountry adoption. That just is a state of the international adoption world. As far as the division between public and private, it's when you look at the numbers, it's pretty split. About 50% of adoptions nationally are private adoptions. That could include infant adoption. It could include relative adoption, step-parent adoption, confirmatory adoptions, which is what we're referring to adoptions in our LGBT community, certain types of adoption. And then the other half of that is public foster care adoptions, kids from foster care that definitely need homes as well.
What's the process like? And I'm sure there are a lot of nuances and different things, situation based. But what does that process look like if someone's interested in adopting?
Yeah. So every family that's going to adopt needs what we call a home study. It's a pretty intense process. It involves finding an agency that will conduct that home study. We work with all types of adoptions, from relative to step-parent, international to domestic infant. We will interview the couple. We will get background checks. We will get to know the families pretty intensely, talk about a lot of different things, their philosophy on parenting, their education, their employment history, and that culminates into a physical document that ends up with an approved home study so that family then is an eligible adoptive family. And then we will help those families through the remainder of the process, the legal part, finding a match or a situation for a child. Those are things that we assist with as well.
What is and you obviously deal with a lot of adoptive families or people who are interested in adoption. What would you say is the number one, I don't know if I want to call it a mistake, but maybe errant expectation that you see couples or individuals come in with when they're starting out their interest in the adoption process?
I would say the wait. There is a wait. It is not going to be a quick process from the home study process to the waiting phase when you're waiting to be matched. And those are non-relative adoptions. Those are infant adoptions that we're speaking of, or even international. Some families come in with an idea of, we're going to do this home study, and a year from now, we're going to have a baby in our home, and we're going to be a family of 3 or 4 or whatever that might be. And so having that that expectation, or not to have an expectation or put a timeline on it, will help families with that, because that waiting process is grueling for them. That is hard, to wait for a situation to come to them. The other piece that I would advise families who are looking into the adoption process is to expect there to be fees. The cost has risen quite a bit over the last couple of decades. It is tough for some families to swallow that cost, and we try. We have some reduced fees for eligible families. There are grants out there for families to help them mitigate some of the costs, but those are the two areas that I definitely feel families should consider when they're getting into this.
And speaking of considering, what about, let's talk about some of the kids who are in need of a home, 4, 5, 6, 7. How difficult is that to place those kids, and talk about the need for them?
Yeah, so children that are in out-of-home placement, what we call foster care, are in foster care for an average of 18 months or more. Teens are the hardest to place. There's a record number of kids that age out of the foster care system. They turn 18, they haven't found a permanent home, and they're pretty much left on their own to fend for themselves. The system doesn't have a whole lot for them once they turn 18. So teens are at the highest risk of not finding homes. So those are difficult to place. What we call difficult to place now is those older children, because they do have challenges, but they are lovely children, and every child needs a home. And there are families out there that are fantastic, that are open to taking a child that's 4 or 5, 10, 12, 16, and helping them to find that permanent home in that family.
Mary's story was titled "The Changing Face of Adoption." How would you, when you talk about what adoptive families look like, what a family looks like, how has that changed? What does that look like now compared to what it looked like 35, 40 years ago?
Sure. I would say there is no typical family anymore. We see single individuals, we see single men, single women, we see married couples, we see couples who have been married for a year, couples who have been married for 15 years, couples who are in their 20s, 40s, sometimes 50s. We see relatives adopting. That there's been a big increase in the number of relatives that are adopting loved ones, children that they've been caring for perhaps a couple of years or even a decade, and they want to make it permanent. They may have had guardianship, and they've been caring for this relative. It could be a grandchild, could be a niece or a nephew, could be a cousin. But they've been caring for these children for whatever reason. The birth family was not in a position to care for them for a number of different reasons. And so now they want to make it permanent. So we've seen a big increase in the number of families adopting loved ones, and giving them permanency.
Why do you think that particular area has increased so much?
Some of it keeps children out of foster placement. So relatives will take in a child from a birth family who maybe is struggling due to incarceration or substance use or financially. There are a lot of things that we can see in our communities that have increased. And so that has led to families stepping in, relatives stepping in to care. I can speak that myself as a grandparent. If one of my children struggled, in a heartbeat, I'd take in my grandchildren, and care for them in whatever way that meant. So there are a lot of relatives out there that do that in order to keep children with a family member.
Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to put this out there. But if someone's interested in finding out more, if they want to inquire as a potential a pregnant mother potentially giving up a child for adoption, or someone who's interested in adopting, whether that be an infant or an older child, what should they do? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I recommend they pick up the phone and give us a call. We would love to talk to them about the process, what that looks like, what their options are on both sides of this, adoptive parents or birth parents. Expectant parents who just need, sometimes they just need to know, what does it look like? What control do I have in the process? And is somebody going to be there to help me through this? And we definitely will. Adoptive families will explain what are all the routes to growing your family and what does that look like as well. We spend a lot of time talking and explaining things to families because it's not a simple process.
Very daunting, but if anybody can do it, Angie, it's you. We just appreciate your insight. I mean, you are just so remarkably lovely, but also to think about the work that you're doing, it's got to be so gratifying.
Absolutely. I love every day of my job.
Angie Flannery, Executive Director of Adoption Choice, thank you for being here on Open Record.
Thank you.
We will take a break and we will go off the record when we come right back. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have not prepared. At least Mary and I haven't prepared, but Sarah knows because she came up with the question.
I
Oh,
did.
boy, yeah.
Okay.
Do the lights get dim?
No, it's until like after hours.
Disco ball? Okay.
Not yet. Okay, so Thanksgiving is in 1 week and 2 days. And it's always kind of a big thing, like the menu. What's everyone going to be eating? If you're going to a family meal, if you're doing it at your house, whatever.
Mac and cheese.
Okay.
Anyway.
So this little survey thingy that I found talks about the Thanksgiving menu debate, best and worst sides.
Okay.
So I mean, some of these are fine, but we're going to play smash or pass. So smash
means,
is
yes, good.
Yes, I love it. Pass means hard, no.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll say a thing that might end up on your Thanksgiving table, and you say smash or pass. Ready? Turkey.
Well, smash.
Smash.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, me too. But it's got to be covered in something because turkey can get real dry.
Real dry.
So it's probably the person that
Well,
makes it.
well cooked, well prepped turkey. Yes.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Ham.
Pass.
Pass.
That's more of a Christmas thing for me.
I don't
so I
know.
think it's not a
Yeah.
Thanksgiving
Ham's
thing.
on
So I'm going to say pass.
Ham's gross.
Ham's gross.
Ugh.
Anyway, all right,
Salty.
move on.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's like ham steaks are gross. Okay. Stuffing or dressing.
Stuffing.
Yeah.
Stuffing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, stuffing goes in the bird, right? Dressing is outside of the bird.
I thought it was regional. In Wisconsin, we always called it stuffing.
Well, I call
what?
it stuffing, but we never put it in the bird. It's
Oh, no.
stuffing if you put
I call
in
it
the
stuffing
bird.
if it's like sort of a breadcrumb based
too.
kind of thing.
But so it's the
Stovetop.
same thing.
Dressing to me is liquid that goes
No,
over
no, no, no,
stuff,
no.
like
Same.
gravy.
Yeah,
no,
gravy.
dressing
Yeah,
is
no, yeah.
dressing is stuffing outside the bird.
Then dressing because I don't want it inside the bird.
I don't
That
either. I
just
think
kinda
that's weird.
grosses
That's
me out a
like
little bit.
salmonella.
Anyway.
There's all
Yeah.
these warnings. Okay. But I love that stuff. Okay, green bean casserole.
Oh, hard
Smash.
pass.
Oh, smash.
pass.
I make it
Yeah.
every year.
I love it.
I
The
make it every
worst
year. You
is-
got to top it with
you
an entire
don't-
canister of
So
French
much
onions.
onions.
Said-
yeah.
When it
Yes.
says a third of a cup, I'm like, that's a suggestion.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I go
I
to the
love
store every year, and I will be doing it soon to try to find.
You better
where-
go now.
Yeah.
Those
I know,
crunchy
'cause they
onions are going to be
disappear fast.
gone.
They
what a
disappear
shame.
fast, yeah, but I buy an extra can
Yes,
that's just
just
for the
in case.
munching on while you're making it.
So
Guys.
buttery. Okay. Sorry. Wow. Okay. I eat it once a year, so I always like triple the recipe.
You know what
okay.
Sarah's getting for Christmas? She's getting some French's
Green
onions.
casserole.
Anyway,
Just freeze it after Thanksgiving and give it to me.
some French's onions and ham steak.
Ham steaks. Okay. Sweet potato casserole.
Oh,
I
smash.
like it. I say
You know,
smash.
the thing is,
Smash.
I'll say smash because I'll eat it, but I don't like the sweet. I prefer savory, so I'd
Okay.
prefer cheesy potatoes to.
Oh,
sweet
I
potato
love a good
casserole.
cheesy potato.
Yeah.
The sweet potato casserole I make, I got the recipe from my mother-in-law, but it's like a souffle. So you like whip the sweet potatoes, and then there's like this bomb crunch on the top,
See,
and then it's almost like custardy,
little
but
marshmallow or no?
But
no
that's-
mallow.
no
mallow.
Okay, but that's the thing. I see people who will have it with the marshmallows, and then I think I'm getting dessert, but then
Yeah.
it's not
JK.
a dessert.
No.
So it's
Yeah.
either I want cheesy potato or dessert, but then that's like a mixture of both, and it just never
Yeah.
quite
Okay.
gets.
All
to
right.
me.
But you like it.
It's fine.
Do you
I'll
eat it just to eat
It's
it,
okay.
right?
Yeah,
Like it's there.
It's there. Sure.
Okay.
Why not?
All right. Mashed potatoes.
Oh, smash.
Smash.
Yes,
yeah.
smash. Okay.
Yeah.
Smashed. Okay. With the gravy, right? Okay. Cranberries. Ugh.
The jelly kind
can?
in the can.
The kind of-
yeah.
I grew up with that, so I kind of like. I
do
kind of
too.
like
You
it.
don't
Yeah,
even like
yeah.
you just we would leave it in the can form. Like it would be
The
and you could
mold,
just
slice
slice it.
off a piece, and you got 100%.
You know, there was
All right.
one year I tried to make this like Bobby Flay cranberry orange zest and stuff with black pepper. It was the grossest thing I'd ever made. It was like 3 pounds of trash just right in the garbage. No one ate it. That's because it's dumb.
I wish we could do more of these. We're out of time.
I know.
We got to do this next week again,
Fine.
but we're not because
But we're not.
next week we'll,
Yes.
we'll talk about that.
I'll bring
in a
the
minute.
cranberries.
We'll take a break and we'll say goodbye in a couple of minutes. All right, we're wrapping up this episode of Open Record. Just so you know, next week, Thanksgiving week, we're going to have a re-air, so there won't be a new podcast published. But if you watch Fox 6 News on Sunday night, the week of Thanksgiving, you'll get a re-air. And so we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new... We be back?
We be back.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. In the meantime, thank you, Mary. This was fantastic.
Can I come back?
Yes.
I'll bring
Absolutely.
treats.
Yes.
Absolutely. You have to cry every time.
I'll
though.
bring cranberries.
Also, Sarah, thank you.
Yeah, of
Executive producer Sarah Smith. We also want to thank our editor and the guy behind the video switcher today, Dave Machuda, and our chief photographer, Cale Zimney. With that, I am Bryan Polcyn. We'll be back next week. Well, in 2 weeks.